We are now joined by Nancy Grace, the host of Nancy Grace on HLN, joining us from Orlando, and ABC's legal analyst Dan Abrams here in New York. And Dan, I'd like to start with you. What are the chances we'll see Casey Anthony walking out of that jail today?
I think they're pretty good. She's facing 4 first-degree misdemeanor counts, each of which faces up to a year in prison. She's already served almost 3 years. So even
in harsh circumstances, isolation 23 hours a day.
Yeah, even though that probably wouldn't factor into the judge's decision as to the length of time. But when you're talking about someone who's already served almost 3 years for crimes where the maximum, even if the judge were to put them together, would be up to 4 years. And that would be very unlikely that any judge would give the max, although it's possible. It is possible this judge is going to say, not only is she going to get the max, but I'm going to force her to serve them consecutively, meaning one sentence after the other, which would lead to a 4-year sentence, and she could serve some more time.
And Nancy, we just heard Jose Baez and the prosecutors express some fear about Casey Anthony's safety if, in fact, she walks out of that jail today. Is that a valid concern, do you think?
Yes, I do think it's a valid concern because so many people are up in arms about the verdict. Speaking as to whether she'll get out, most likely she will. Here's the deal. 4 years is the maximum sentence on this. She's already served 997 days. Jail time usually counts day for day. Good behavior. So she's done well over the amount she'd have to do to get out of jail today at 9 o'clock this morning. As to top mom Casey Anthony, I was really struck by Jose Baez's statements that she was a good mom. I don't know what world he's living in, but partying all night long and leaving your girl most likely in the car trunk as the babysitter is not being a good mom.
But Nancy, we also heard the alternate juror that I interviewed yesterday say the same thing, that he thought she was, quote, a good mother. Why do you think the jurors bought into that if, in fact, they were not swayed by that 31 days of lying and partying?
Well, what some of the jurors have said is that their first vote for murder 1 was 10-2. When it got to manslaughter as to negligence of a child, as to whether you're a good mother or not, their big bone of contention was who's really the mother, who's the caretaker. That they were actually split as to whether Cindy Anthony should have been taking the care of the child when she drowned or whether Tot Mom should have been. So I don't know if that's such a great reflection that she's a good mother. But speaking of safety, a bunch of sheriffs just ran into the courthouse wearing gas masks. Now, I don't know what that means to you two, but that means to me that there's a problem in the courthouse behind me.
Okay, well, keep an eye on that for us. Dan, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, just about the fact that juror number 3, the one that we just heard from, seemed to be saying that she thought that it was likely this was an accident, meaning not just that she thought that there was reasonable doubt, not just that she wasn't proven cause of death, but it seemed to me like she was saying that she thought it was more likely than not an accident. It's the same juror who said that she thought that George was probably there, the father. And you have to ask yourself, there was no evidence, none, that George was there.
Both this juror today and the alternate juror yesterday both said they thought George Anthony was being deceitful, that he knew more than he was saying.
Well, but those are two very different things. Being deceitful about whether he was having an affair or not is very different.
No, about the circumstances of Kaylee's death.
See, and that's what's really striking, is that these jurors watched George Anthony on the stand, and they determined that they didn't believe him.
Ruined his testimony.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The affair thing ruined his testimony because I think the whole affair thing really hurt George's testimony because I believe the jury thought if he's lying about that, then what else is he lying about? But the reality is George was turned into the scapegoat. That was the entire defense, was let's blame George Anthony. And listen, Elizabeth, I know you guys just had on a juror that said Nancy Grace is not fit for TV. Just a message out there. When I take a stand, I don't expect people to like what I've got to say, but I do hold myself up to the standard of trying to tell the truth. And if they don't like it or it hurts their feelings, there's nothing I can do about that. But I can tell you this much. Tot Mom is guilty.
But Nancy, you did call the jury a, quote, kooky jury. Last night on your show, you said this was a stunning blow to justice.
I stand by it.
Nancy, you may not agree with what the jurors decided, but don't you risk being in danger of maligning one of the best systems of justice in the world?
Well, you know, having been in the justice system and being a public servant most of my life, having to work sometimes up to 3 and 4 jobs in order to be a public servant, having been a crime victim of violent crime myself, I love our system. I defend our system. I am part of our justice system, and I'm proud of it. And when I feel that there is a miscarriage of justice, it hurts me deeply.
And I think
that's what the not guilty verdict was.
Nancy and I have gone at it a lot throughout this case, but I think it's absolutely Nancy's right to be able to criticize the jury. I mean, she can go out and she can say, I think X, I think Y. And I think it's actually a much more honest way sometimes to cover these kinds of stories, because other people will say, well, I'm not going to tell you how I feel, etc. And then you don't know where they're coming from. No one's going to say, I don't know where Nancy Grace is coming from, ever.
That is true. All right. I want to ask you one final question, though. When you talk about this jury system, Dan, we do have reports that a different juror who has not yet spoken out is requesting money. He wants to be paid.
But this letter was unbelievable.
He has sent a letter
out
got
to
a
media organizations. He got a PR guy who comes in and says, well, I've got juror number 6 here who's ready to talk, but just to be clear, he's not going to consider talking for less than $50,000. I mean, what this juror A forgets is there are 11 other people, many of them who are doing it for free. And secondly, that is just so distasteful. Right. I mean, this is the great fear of our system, is that jurors do things like this.
All right. Dan Abrams, Nancy Grace, thank you so much for both weighing in this morning. Appreciate your points of view.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All right.